Stop funding your 401k, IRA, or qualified plan today. Look, don't fund your IRA. Do this instead. The 15 reasons, yeah, you heard it, 15 reasons your IRA is robbing you of your wealth. Look, money loves momentum. Let's start with some fast money. You don't have to wait till you're 59 and a half to access your retirement plan without penalty. You know, penalties are kind of scary. I went to Catholic school and getting hit on the hand with a ruler by a nun. That's why, penalty is just a big word that gets us to think we can't access this. But there's a 72T distribution to a qualified plan. A 72T distribution refers to a provision under Section 72T, obviously, right, of the Internal Revenue Code that allows individuals to withdraw money penalty-free from a qualified retirement plan, like a 401k or an IRA, before age 15 and a half, provided they adhere to a few specific rules. You have to take out for at least 5 years or till 59 and a half, whichever one's longer. Has to be substantially equal payments, but that's an important thing to understand. You can also roll over to a self-directed IRA. There's a few options here, right? But let's think about this. It's kind of a ream. Why would you ever partner with the government? You wouldn't, right? When you put money in a retirement plan like a 401k or an IRA, you're partnering with the government. They're kind of tax addicts. After taxes, your 401k are probably going to look more like a 201k because deferring tax and saving tax are way different things. One means you don't have to. The other means you don't have to right now. Because who doesn't want to wait to pay taxes until they're older and crankier? That's why retirement plans are so crazy. Who wants to wait until they're older to finally enjoy life? To wait to have fun until after they retire? Kind of sounds terrible. I'm tired now. Think I'm going to go jet skiing when I'm 85 and I might break a hip? I'm not going to get crunk in the club that time. I could barely do that now. The only enjoyment you get at 85 is when you wake up. And look, some days you wish that wouldn't happen. Your body hurts, your eyes are swollen shut, and then Biden had to go be president. All right, let's go. Problem number one, there's really limited opportunity for cash flow. 401ks don't provide immediate cash flow, which means that you can't benefit from them through velocity and utilization. Velocity is creating cash flow off your assets so you can be financially independent. Utilization is when there's a distressed asset, being able to take your cash and buy that at a discount so that you can make money on the buy. See, the theory is that letting your money sit allows it to compound. For most people, that means it kind of just stagnates. Most people not choose to utilize these funds even when there's a particularly compelling opportunity that arises. And because of that, even if they would have had penalties, that opportunity might make them far more wealthier than their 401k would. But think about it. Why did these plans get invented? It's great for an institution. If you're a financial institution, what do you want from people? Their money. How often? As often as possible. How long do you want to hold on to it for? Well, as long as possible. And how much do you want to give them back when they want to withdraw? As little as possible. These are the 4 rules of financial institutions, and the 401k fits in so well. Because not only do some firms automatically enroll you if you're an employee, you have to opt out. It doesn't only get your money, it gets the government's money as well, and these institutions get to take the fee on the entire amount. So this is part of the problem. People just pass on numerous legitimate opportunities because I think we all have plenty of opportunities to come up in our life. It's just that not a lot of people have liquidity during those times. If their money's in the market and the market's down, but that's a time where you could buy a home right next to you at a deep, deep discount. Well, you might not do that because, again, of the penalty. So this gets people to think in long haul and never touching it. The second issue is a lack of liquidity. The money's tied up. These penalties attached for this early withdrawal. Although there are a few technicalities that allow for penalty-free withdrawals, like I said with 72T, the restrictions are kind of so numerous that there's very few know how to navigate them. Maybe there's a major issue in your life. There might be some exclusions there. Or maybe it's a first time buying a home. There might be a few exclusions there, but it's a certain amount of money. The third issue that's really a problem with qualified plans is market dependency. See, the performance of the funds is usually dependent upon market factors that most individuals don't have knowledge of or ability to understand or mitigate. This means that their retirement plans are based on unknowable projections, making for a dangerous and uncertain planning environment. Uncertainty causes fear, and fear leads to mistakes, leads to worry, scarcity, and ultimately lost hopes and dreams. Do you want to live your richest life only if the market cooperates? I mean, when the market goes down in your retirement plan, does your mindset follow? Does it create scarcity for you? Does it create fear? Does it create frustration that you've worked so hard for your money and now you put it somewhere you don't really control and you just hope for the best? The fourth, and this is really for, if you're an employer, you might offer a match and even call it free money. Maybe it's one of the benefits that you provide. But maybe someone has a student loan that has a high interest rate. You could match paying that and still get the same write-off. And for the employee, there's kind of a myth around the match. Take the match. It's a guaranteed 100% return. That's what a lot of people say, right? But the problem is that money's in the market and there might be restrictions. Might take 5 years before that vests. The market might go down and you lose some of that money. And it doesn't match on your existing funds. It's only on new deposits. So I'm sure you've heard it before. Free money. That's kind of a myth. See, if that were true, people would end up with so much money in retirement because there'd be all this additional money on the past money being matched, but it's only on your new deposits. And I'm not saying that's a terrible thing. I'm just saying if you have high interest rate credit cards, or if you don't have enough liquidity, or if you haven't invested in yourself, or if there's other opportunities that could do better than what the stock market does, this could get you to falsely start putting money into this match that you may not benefit from till 59 and a half. And there's a lot of factors between now and then. So you have to really think about the true impact on your bottom line. When do you get to benefit from and utilize the match? The fifth issue, a lack of knowledge. How much do you really know about your 401k, your IRA? Do you know what happens to the money? Do you know where the funds are invested? Have you seen the financials for these companies? Do you know the key executives? Do you know the fund manager by name and their history, their investment philosophy and performance? And how can you expect to gain a return from something you know so little about? How can you create real tangible value in the world with a 401k? And how is that really called investing? Again, most people think that stocks are synonymous with investing, and so we have an over-reliance on the stock market in most retirement plans. And there's restrictions within these mutual funds. These mutual funds can only invest based upon the objective of the mutual fund. And if it's not a time where that's in favor, like we're having negative years, they have to stay in growth-oriented funds or growth-oriented stocks inside of the fund. And so that could cost you years and, harm on the time value of money. Here's another piece with these plans. Administration fees. These funds are subject to various administration fees in addition to expense ratios for the funds and 12B1 fees, which are actually marketing expenses for mutual funds. This is a fact that most people and even many advisors kind of ignore, but it means that your returns will be negatively impacted and your projections could be off substantially. So let's think about a small fee. If you have $100,000 that's earning 10% over 30 years, grows to 1.74 million. Amazing. But if there's legal fees, admin fees, 12B1 fees, different things like that, especially if you're with a fiduciary, and they might be charging 1% or 1.5% on your overall portfolio. Let's just say it's a small amount. It's less than 1%. So you get 9.2 instead of 10%. Your money grows to 1.4 million. That's over $300,000 of negative impact because of fees. And there was a time back when I started in financial services where they didn't have to disclose all these fees. There was an engineering firm out of Seattle, and this firm started to do analysis and saying, why isn't our 401k growing more? And it's because of the undisclosed fees. Now, they eventually created legislation to say, hey, you can't have 10 different fees inside of these plans. And at the back of the Wall Street Journal, it talked about it. It wasn't even a cover story. Some of these firms were buying, the joke was they were buying like gold garbage cans. It was crazy the amount of money they were making because of lack of disclosure. So even though that's improved, there's still a myriad of fees that if you're unaware of, you need to be kind of like a financial detective, look at it and analyze and see what is it doing to your performance. Now, there's some fees that are worth the performance. The right fund manager might be worth that expense ratio. But there's other fees that are percentage of assets versus a flat fee for administration. So the seventh issue is underutilization because of tax deferral. As I kind of joked at the beginning, if you don't like paying taxes today, why did you like it more in the future? I remember my grandma, I sat down, I said, Grandma, you get this required minimum distribution on your retirement plan. You got to start taking this amount out. Otherwise, there'll be a 50% penalty on your required minimum distribution plus taxes. I think it was the first time I heard her say the F word. Not the last time, but definitely the first time. I think it kind of broke the dam. So the tax deferral aspect, which is kind of touted as this great boon, is actually the primary factor contributing to qualified plan money being notoriously underutilized. Most retirees let their money sit, even though it's their retirement years, because the fear that they might trigger tax consequences. See, they might pull money out of the retirement plan that's deferred tax, and raise the tax on other income they have because of marginal tax rates. Average tax rates say if you make $100,000 and you pay $17,000 in tax, that's a 17% average. But the first dollars you earn are only taxed at 10%. Later dollars could be taxed at 15 or 25%. And so if you have new money come in, it can raise the taxes on other assets, right? So if you have to pay the taxes at a later date, how's that actually a tax advantage? The reason there's no tax paid is that there's a deferred income by never taking constructive receipt of your earnings. So it's an earnings deferral. And so instead of deferring those earnings into the future, through the qualified plan, you'd pay your taxes today. But now the taxes would be covered. What if taxes go up in the future? From 1944 to 1981, the top tax bracket was above 50%. So what happens if you defer taxes and they raise the taxes with the government? Or fortunately, maybe you'd have more money in the future, therefore have less necessity for this. But if you did take it, you'd have to pay more tax than what you thought you were going to save. And that leads me to the next point: higher tax brackets upon withdrawal. Now, that could just be simply because you have more money in the future. It could be because you have less tax deductions, or it could be because the government, they raise tax rates. So it's another problem that kind of relates to that underutilization. See, the likelihood of you being in a higher tax bracket during retirement years, well, it's a high likelihood. Why? Just because of inflation. If we think back, to 1980, people would have thought $1 million in a retirement plan was a huge amount of money. Now, that might not be nearly enough. If someone's making $100,000 a year, $1 million isn't going to replace that. And so as we earn more money, but our money's not as powerful because of inflation, our tax rates go up as we earn more. So inflation starts to push people into higher tax brackets in the future. Now, if you've achieved any measure of success living through the accumulation theory, setting money aside, and have it work, you're likely to be in a higher tax bracket. Most advisors, however, project that you'll be in a lower tax bracket. This means that deferring your taxes will result in a greater tax burden if you have more money. And just because of inflation, as I said before. So this projection from an advisor is almost like, oh, let's plan on failure. Let's plan on having less, even though you need more just to live the same lifestyle. All right, I get a little bit passionate about that. I think it's kind of ironic that people project healthy returns on the retirement plan while also projecting that they'll be in a lower tax bracket retirement. That's kind of at odds. Now, the ninth issue here is estate taxes. 401ks are kind of sitting ducks for estate taxes. Much qualified plan money that's never utilized by those that have saved it because they've accumulated, they hold off for so long on withdrawing it, but when they pass on the next generation, it would not only potentially trigger an income tax, but might also be subject to an estate tax if there's enough money in there. Now, you can give all of that money to a spouse tax-free. And there is something called a stretch IRA that, if done right, nobody ever gets the money. It says, oh, well, we don't want to have our heirs pay the tax, but they still can't utilize the money. Eventually, you're going to have to pay the tax because it's been deferred, and there are required minimum distributions at certain ages. So if you accumulate a substantial amount of wealth, you could end up having a estate tax with this without much that you could do about it. It's one of those assets that is very complicated, where when you have real estate, you get a step up in basis. You might be able to do charitable trusts. You might be able to do other things like move it out of your estate on how it's owned, so it would be subject to the estate tax. But in a qualified plan, it has to be owned by an individual. You can't pass it off to a trust or something like that, right? So the government might take a much healthier chunk because estate taxes could be like 50%. Just kind of depends on the year and the different plans. Now, the next piece, see, these plans are so easy to get into, but most people don't have an exit strategy. Getting into a 401k, it's simple enough, might automatically come out of a paycheck. As I said before, many companies start employees' 401k automatically when they hire them. You have to opt out if you don't want it. And these programs sound great. You get a match, a tax deferral, and a wide choice of funds relating to your so-called risk tolerance, but how are you going to get out of it? How many people consider this when they start the contributions? How many people understand the penalty and tax consequences? Most of us don't fully understand or realize the implications until it's too late. So the qualified money sits unused. In this case, what's the real rate of return on money if you never, ever use it? And who's really the beneficiary? Not the people who invest, and not to a large extent their heirs, because it's probably going to the institutions and the government. This is the thing. When I first looked at 401ks, I had one. and I got a 3% match, and I'm like, okay, that's free money. And so I was excited about that, and I thought these might be the best plans ever. And it was in the 1998, 1999 time period. The stock market was just exploding, and so I'm looking at like high rates of return. I'm thinking, man, nothing can beat this. It was bad news, and like a sickening feeling in my stomach when I realized these weren't actually saving tax, they were delaying tax. So what does that mean? Well, if I just take $10,000 and I put it in the plan, it looks like I have $10,000 in the plan. But it's FBO, for benefit of, meaning I can't just get the money out the next day. Really, if I would have just taken it, it might be like $7,000 to me, $3,000 to the government, right? But if I want to take it out before 59.5, I can only get $6,000 the next day, and the government gets $4,000 because of that penalty. So what's being touted as this major advantage means that you can't touch your money along the way. There's a myriad of fees that are assessed against it. And here's the next issue. The 11th issue is it's subject to government change. Do you know that your 401k doesn't even technically belong to you? You got to read the fine print. It goes back to what I mentioned, FBO, for benefit of. In other words, it's held in a trust by a custodian on your behalf and subject to a myriad of government regulations and changes. It's essentially a tax code, and they can change that tax code. I mean, if history proves to be reliable, 401k funds are therefore kind of in great jeopardy. I mean, I heard it didn't matter which side, government, whether it was Republicans or Democrats, they've talked about, hey, we're worried about this deficit, we're worried about this debt, but we haven't even taxed retirement plans yet. So just as the government raises and lowers taxes at a whim, so can they change the rules and take the money you save so diligently. I'd rather be in private contracts. The 12th issue here is golden handcuffs. Now, as an employer, you might think, oh, great, I've got these golden handcuffs. I've got these benefits. Now, those benefits might be just at par. It's not like getting you a huge advantage because you offer these things. I remember we got hired and we went into a firm and we actually met with everybody individually and we built a plan. We restructured loans. We paid off, inefficient loans. We figured out how to build peace of mind funds. We started to really help people that were closer to retirement get this lake home or this dream place that they had always been saving for, because the last few years, this plan doesn't perform. I mean, when you think about it, when you have 30 years, it kind of looks like you get this, that last 10 years here, you get that hockey stick, you get that growth with compound interest. But the first 10 years, it's kind of an anemic, slow pace because as you're reinvesting your interest, there's just not a lot that's happening yet. And so the later years, the new deposits don't have much time to gain. Most of your growth is from the existing money that already is in there. So we thought, what if you take that money and pay off a loan? You can improve your cash flow a lot more than the cash flow it would kick off with a 401k, as one example. Or if you're going to buy something in the future, what if you got that today and now you have access, you have that real estate that has leverage because it could grow from the full value, not just what you're paying every month. Now, that's not for everybody, but it's just some things to consider. But if you're an employer offering this because you want golden handcuffs, you don't want golden handcuffs. You want a culture that people want to work for. You want to really invest in your employees. And yeah, a lot of people think, oh, well, I should offer this because it's responsible. But the problem is far too many people don't have enough money in the retirement plan. And these things even kind of came out because back in the day, corporations used to provide pensions, but they didn't do a great job providing them. They had really faulty belief systems where they're like, okay, the stock market's going to average 8 to 10%, and that's going to grow, but we only have to pay 6% of that out. But they didn't understand disinvesting. When people got to the place where they were retired and they were now taking their pension, sometimes the market was down, not even just 1 year in a row, maybe 2 years in a row. And so as they had to make the pension payments, even though the funds weren't performing, it started to pull away at the principal and it disinvested. And so that's why so many of them went bankrupt or had to, clear out their pensions. We saw government pensions in the state of California that bankrupted essentially entire counties. Stockton, California had more money going towards pensions than they could pay for their existing government employees at one time. It was a mess. It was a nightmare because of miscalculations of things that they couldn't control. And so this golden handcuff nature of like, oh, well, you have these benefits, but you don't get them unless you're here for very long. Do you want people that are working with you that don't love what they do, that don't enjoy doing the work, right? Are you at your current job if you're an employee because it aligns with your passions and purpose or because of the great benefits? I've heard too many people say, oh, I don't love what I do, but it provides good benefits. Well, that's not a great situation. Are you just holding on long enough for your qualified plan to be fully vested? Besides being attached to the deceptive security of a 401k, what are some ways you could become wealthier and generate more opportunity? Well, investing in yourself, investing with an alignment of your investor DNA. Your investor DNA is your values. things that are important to you. It's your competencies. What do you have knowledge in? And it's really the things that drive you, where you have interests, and then invest there, grow that. How do you add more value? How do you become more valuable? How do you become a better investor? This isn't as much investing as it is automation. So I've already mentioned the 13th issue, which is disinvesting. Suppose you're retired and you want to begin taking interest, right? You're taking interest payments from your qualified plan. So if you had $1 million, and let's just say that you're going to take out $60,000 a year, that's great. See, if you make 10% that first year, you're going to take out $60,000 and still have more than $1 million. But if you have a year where it loses 20% or 5% or negative years twice in a row at 10%, what's going to happen is that $1 million gets down to $800,000. And if you're still going to take $60,000 out of that, you start to decline too much because you're eating into the principal. And you might think, oh, but I've got an average of 8%. I'm only going to withdraw 6%. But that 8% is not fixed every single year. And you don't know which years it's going to go down. The earlier in your retirement, the more danger it has. So you got to think about what happens to your principal when the funds are volatile and the market experiences down years. Again, even if you receive an 8% average, but overall, there will be years where you see a negative 10 or even a negative 3, so you tap into that money, it starts to diminish your principal. Now, a lot of people think about retirement planning and financial planning almost as the same thing. But financial planning really takes into consideration everything: car insurance, homeowners, liability, disability, medical, life insurance, taxes, corporate structure, investing. There's a lot more components: estate planning, legacy planning, trusts and asset protection. And a lot of times people think, oh, well, I've got my retirement plan set up, but it's one-dimensional. It's one thing. There's no holistic plan. That's the 14th issue. See, on many occasions, I've just witnessed people whose finances are in shambles, who have much more pressing needs, but they're still diligently contributing to their 401ks. High interest rates, but they're contributing to their 401ks. Having to borrow just to make ends meet, but they're contributing to their 401ks because they feel like that's what they have to do, or that's what they have been doing. They've been convinced to do so, of course, because of the match or because of the tax benefits. And what other benefits are promoted? This is like people trying to take care of a scraped knee when they have a slit wrist. What do they really need is a bigger picture plan, a macroeconomic approach to their finances that are going to help them identify, prioritize, and manage all the pieces of their financial puzzle with all the pieces coordinated and working together. Maybe before putting money into this, having the right financial team could be critical. Having enough liquidity for peace of mind could be critical. Making sure that you have some staying power in case there's a financial surprise in your life. Having ways to transfer your risk or have your basic planning done. And then consider this as well, in addition to that, not alone. I guess the 15th issue here is it's really a neglect of stewardship. People think if they just throw enough money at a retirement plan or follow the experts somehow, some way, and without direct involvement, they end up with plenty of cash in 30 years. Unfortunately, when things don't turn out the way they hope, then it's easy to blame others. And even though it's from a faulty, dangerous, and dogmatic financial model. If you could only experience today the feelings of your future self when the hard work, risk, and delay that leave you in a less than ideal place because you funded this and neglected other aspects like training yourself on how to create cash flow, how to save tax, building a financial team that helps you do due diligence, having exit strategies so you can benefit from it, most importantly, creating financial independence. Financial independence gives you so much more opportunity and options. It frees up your active income to build more assets. So, this is about acquiring knowledge. Instead of being in a place of regret or bitterness or fear, ruled by the what-ifs and held captive by if only. I get frustrated with these plans. I'm not saying that you should never have one, but here's my rant. Why are we indoctrinated to neglect cash flow? If we went into a bank today and we want to make deposits, they don't take those deposits and put it in a retirement plan. They lend the money out to create cash flow. That's the lifeblood of that business. If we neglect cash flow along the way, we're susceptible to market changes. We then have to trade time for money sometimes. We have to work in Herculean efforts just to make ends meet when things don't go according to plan, all because we've locked our money away. We've trapped it, and we haven't created an assistance with our assets to create that cash flow, to create some breathing room. These plans they don't emphasize skill development. These plans are locked up. They're tied up. often they're competing against your quality of life. They're an additional expense. Yes, it's an investment that grows, hopefully, but now it's more money that you have to set aside, maybe delaying other aspects of your life that are absolutely critical. And again, these create a false sense of security. Why not have liquidity? Why not have cash flow? Why not understand where your money's going? Having exit strategies. This is a completely different form and financial framework that leads to prosperity instead of scarcity. So that leaves us with the question, what would money Jesus do? Now, I think stop funding the plan if you have high interest rate loans. If you have really high interest rate loans, why not pay those and improve your cash flow and increase your peace of mind? Build your peace of mind fund. Have at least 6 months liquidity that you could access without penalty, without volatility of the stock market, so that if something happened where you wanted to change a career or you had a health issue or something was going on with an emergency in your family, you have staying power. If you have high interest rate loans, focus on that first. But here's the key. Invest in yourself to become a better investor. Invest in yourself to increase your skill set so you can make more money. When you make more money, you can have more cash to create cash flow. You can have more cash to make a higher quality of life along the way without crushing your future finances, right? Build your financial team. Do you have the right accountant that can save you taxes? Do you have the right tax attorney that can save you taxes, or the right corporate attorney that sets up the right corporations if you're a business owner so that you're paying less in tax and protecting your assets? Do you have a legacy plan so you can change your family's financial future and for generations to come, they don't have to start in financial bondage? So maybe a thing to consider is there is a backdoor Roth. If you think taxes might go up in the future or that you're going to continue to make more money, or maybe you have a year where there's less income, no matter how much money you make, see, because normally you get phased out on a Roth, you can do a backdoor Roth where you convert any of these plans to a Roth one time. Now, you're going to have to pay the taxes on that, but you have to ask, is it better to pay the taxes today or in the future? Another consideration is a self-directed IRA. You can roll these over. Now, if you're employed, you have to look at what the provisions are for the administrator. Maybe it allows you to move to a self-directed IRA. Maybe you have to stay in that plan while you're still employed. But you can roll over to a self-directed IRA, and there are certain companies out there where there's a flat fee instead of a percentage. And then it opens you up to things more than just the stock market. Now, I'd have to heed some warning here. A lot of people get involved in private investments and they lose a lot of money. There's a lot of risk there. Public markets are typically more stable, although private markets have more opportunity for upside. You have to really know what you're doing. Another consideration, and this is where you have to talk to an investment advisor, but I had my 401k, I decided to cash it out. Now, I put a yard in my house. That's what I did with it. Not like the best investment in the world, but I didn't really like where this was going, and so I paid the 10% penalty. But would you take a 10% loan if you only had to pay 10% the first year and it was never charged an interest rate the rest of the time? Because otherwise you might be borrowing money at a much higher rate than if you just cash this out. Another thing to consider is how there might be exit strategies. Learn about the Rockefeller method. There might be a way through that 72T to start putting this into a more stable, available, tax-advantaged fund, and then you could utilize that along the way. Or maybe you have other assets, and I think tax diversification is important. If you have everything tax deferred, you're in a pretty susceptible situation. But if you have other assets, like let's say that you have real estate, you could donate that real estate to a charitable trust, creating a partial tax deduction upon donation, sell it tax-free, and that partial tax deduction you can use to start pulling money out of your retirement plan. So are there other tax strategies outside of this that can offset and help you get some of the money out? And one of the things to be really careful about is never take, capital gain assets and put it into retirement plans, even if it's self-directed, because if you're going to hold it for longer than a year, you go from long-term capital gains, which might be 20%, and move to ordinary income, which could be as high as 37.5%. And you might not be able to write it off from a depreciation standpoint. So you're taking a good classification of an asset and making it poor. Now, I know other people that have used a Roth IRA and they've made huge returns in their Roth IRA when they're doing fix and flips, when they're doing short-term capital gains, and they're not paying any tax on that as it grows in a Roth IRA. So hopefully you now understand some of the misnomers, misinformation, and myths when it comes to qualified plans. If you have one, great. It means that you saved money. You did the best that you could. Now the consideration is, what could you do to improve your situation? Increase your cash flow, invest in yourself, and take back control of your finances and life.